Mr. Brewer again, bringing you part 2 of 2. As you may have noticed in the last video, I am losing my voice, so I do apologize. Even if you can't hear what I'm saying, I hope you can. Make sure you get all the notes. They're written in red and underlined. So let's move forward. Well, that's the same thing over. Alright, our goals. Learn how the Cold War affected people and economies in East Asia. 2 communist countries after World War II. We had China, which we talked about in the last video, or the People's Republic of China, big China, communist. And North Korea, led by the Soviet Union after World War II, also becomes communist. Both dominated by communism, totalitarianism, we should say, also after World War II. And North Korea, controlled by Russia, of course, and the Nationalist Party, who controlled China, was overthrown, and they, of course, retreated to Taiwan. Now, the communist countries during 1980, this is the height of communism. You can see them all highlighted here on the map. As you can see, Russia dominates this map, and a lot of Asia also. But we're in East Asia, so we're going to concentrate on 2 of the countries that really did that. And China, which is right here, and North Korea, which you will see right here on the peninsula, which shares with South Korea, but divided on the 38th parallel. So this happens, and there was a Cold War, and we have to figure out what was this Cold War. Now, the Cold War was the response of the rest of the world to the spread of communism. So communism, after World War II, people were still trying to spread this idea of communism around, and they did a pretty good job. And this was the response of mostly Europe and America after World War II. And the way they did that was they refused to expand these economies. They refused to buy or sell to these people in these economies, which eventually they hoped would drag down these economies and force them to change their ideas about what they thought a good economy would look like. Now, this Cold War lasted from 1947 to 1991, and it's Gorbachev who introduces democracy in Russia that actually marks the end of the Cold War. As you can see, it was a war where no shots were literally taken at anyone. Sometimes there were wars that broke out, say the Korean War and the Vietnam War later, that broke out over these things, but this was a war on communism, not exactly a war on a certain country. So, the world's position after World War II was the containment. You bottle it, you keep it from going anywhere, of communism. So the containment of communism. They didn't want a third world war, and that's kind of what it boiled down to. Now, the effects of containment on these countries was pretty vast, we know now. North Korea and China are limited to trade with other communist countries. So here's Russia, here's North Korea, here's China. They can trade with each other, but they can't export out. They're having a hard time making money. If a country can't export, they can't make money. And if they have to import, they're losing money. And that's kind of how economy works in the short term. So they're limited to only trading with each other. And yes, Russia has a lot of things to export, and they do help out a lot. But at the same time, we know now that Russia was really suffering at the same time. So their economies don't grow at the same rate as their democratic neighbors. In South Korea, we saw that they had advancements in technology, and today they're doing integrated circuits, which are pretty advanced stuff, and they make cruise ships. They even have a car company, Kia, which you might be familiar with, and they have a lot of exports. But North Korea doesn't have these things, and we see that they're limited to their growth as opposed to other countries that surrounded them. So they start seeing the benefit of not being, China especially, not being communist or not being totalitarianism. And also, cultural diffusion does not hit these places like it did in the past. I mean, we said the story of East Asia was cultural diffusion, how things moved. But today, if you go to China or North Korea, even today, the newspapers are censored. They don't get any American news in North Korea, but in China, it's censored. So we have censored newspapers there. They don't get the full effects of Twitter, the internet, Facebook, things that you enjoy today, every day probably. They don't enjoy those things. They don't get to. They don't see those things because the government doesn't want them to know outside ideas. it's just how they've done things. So the last thing is the low use of personal technology. Same kind of thing. They figure if they keep the technology out, then people can't use it to get out. I don't know if you realized that a couple years ago we had some revolts in Egypt, and those were brought on almost totally by Twitter, like tweeting. People tweeted what they thought and what they felt, and they gathered and they overthrew an entire government because of this. So technology is very powerful, and there's very low use of it in these countries. So in the modern era, we have China and North Korea, 91 to the present, so this is post-Cold War. China has been moving toward a command economy, from a command economy towards a capitalist, which is interesting because that's what Taiwan, or Little China, has, because they're democratic. So China's moving towards more what Taiwan has. But they're still criticized for human rights violations, and we'll talk about that more in class. But human rights are the main one is the one-child policy. North Korea remains staunchly communist today, totalitarian in every aspect. They have very poor living conditions, like we spoke about before, and very low per capita technology for their citizens. I appreciate it, guys. This was our government series on this. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sorry. I know you can hear I'm losing my voice. Hopefully it's better by Monday. Thanks, guys.